Well, welcome everybody to the American Space Museum. I'm Marquette. We're so glad you're with us to stay curious. Our first show of 2024. Hope you enjoyed the holidays with your family and friends and got some good spacey gifts under your tree, I hope. I know I got a couple mugs, t shirts, the usual things from the loved ones that know I'm just out of my head about being out of my world, like we are here on our green screen today. Hope everybody's had a wonderful time to recapture their energy for a great 2024. We've got running the board today, Selvin Trotter. Thank you, Selvin, for pinch hitting for Marty Winkle. Marty's a little under the weather and probably won't be in the rest of the week. So get well, my friend. Marty and I and Selvin have done 960 episodes of Stay Curious thanks to you. And we really appreciate everybody out there that was even begging for more during my vacation the last week. And we appreciate Dave Stange and all you great fans out there that have been with us from day one. Today we got a program to kick off what we love doing best, and that is celebrating the Space Shuttle era. The 30 years, 3 decades that have changed our world into the 21st century like we have today. A quarter way into the 21st century, and there's only been 2 years of this century that humans weren't orbiting the Earth, as we've had continuous operation of the International Space Station. So I'm going to get kicked off here and ask Selvin, is everything fine on our board over there?
So far.
All right.
Any comments?
And if we have some hiccups, we know that Carlton Bailey will be out there telling us about it. We appreciate Carlton and his launch photography in 2023. We're going to brag about you all this week and next week. Have an annual wrap up Friday. Okay. We have Rick Horner coming in, a Lockheed Martin senior engineer and science manager. Rick Horner. All right, you're going to enjoy him. He is the husband of Perry Horner, whose brother Eric Baker is a test project engineer that we've had on this show on here. So we're going to kick off our first guest on Thursday. Looking forward to Rick Horner, who's had an illustrious career with the Shuttle and then working for Lockheed Martin on many of their projects on there. So gonna have all kinds of things this year that we haven't had before, but let's look at these shuttles of the month of January as I make them big there, get back into my groove. 10 space shuttles of January, and it's a great month to begin the year with great achievements. We had two Russian Mir spaceship exchanges of Americans. Two astronauts flew twice in January. We'll tell you who those are. Two astronauts named Nelson flew together, as well as two NASA administrators, future NASA administrators, flew together in the month of January. And of course, we had the two tragedies of Challenger and Columbia. And of those 14 who died in those Challenger and Columbia accidents, two astronauts flew their first mission in the month of January. We'll tell you who those are here in just a minute. As we look at this beautiful, beautiful shot that we'll never see again, a reusable space plane breaking the sound barrier with the atmosphere just clustered around it like that in the wave of sound. 54 humans orbited the Earth in the month of January. And Nicole Stott would like for me to call y'all Earthlings, okay? 54 Earthlings orbited Earth. 50 and two of them repeated, so that's 56 seats or tickets punched total. 78 days in space among all of the four orbiters. Challenger was launched, but of course did not achieve orbit. But all five orbiters were launched in the month of January. 8 of those 10 shuttle launches of the month occurred before noon. So it kept our space workers up early. One night launch, STS-72, with our good friend Winston Scott, a great supporter of the American Space Museum. Night landing, there was one at Edwards. 5 of the 10 missions you see here had 7 crew members, all full, all right, utilizing all the seats on the shuttle. 5 of 10 had 7 crew members. Of the landings, 5 were at Kennedy Space Center and 3 at Edwards. 4 of these 10 missions deployed satellites, including a Department of Defense top secret mission, 51C there, I'll tell you at the bottom, in 1985. 2 missions to Mir. 2 missions tested spacesuits and International Space Station tools. We'll briefly talk about those. There were 3 laboratories that flew, and like I said, 1 Department of Defense mission on there. So let's see. We'll kick these off here a little bit there, and just do a brief thumbnail sketch of all of the shuttles of the month, because we're going to elaborate on 2 or 3 of them at a time as we look at that awesome photograph there. The first shuttle to be launched in the month of January is STS-32 on January 9th. Of course, I have my shuttle scroll here, Selvin, to consult anytime that I need be of when the dates are and so forth, signed by astronauts and launch directors. One day we'll raffle that baby off, my shuttle scroll. But here is the first of the year was on the January 9th, STS-32. This was the Long Duration Exposure Facility Retrieval, and that's what's featured there. And just let me consult a reference that I love using, the Human Spaceflight Mission Patch book there. Many of you are familiar with this book. You have astronauts sign it here on the Space Coast. STS-32 Crew Patch depicts the orbiter rendezvousing with the Long Duration Exposure Facility, the LDEF, from above. The SYNCOM satellite, SYNCOM, that can be seen successfully deployed on the right side there, is on its way to geosynchronous orbit. 5 stars are arranged so that 3 are on one side of the orbiter and 2 on the other for Space Transportation System Flight number 32. The 7 major rays of the sun are in remembrance of the crew members of STS-51L. See the sun shining there? Now, they love honoring our fallen heroes on a lot of the missions, but this was specifically important because LDEF stayed out in space 2.5 years longer than it was supposed to because of the 2.5-year delay in getting the shuttle back up after the Challenger explosion. In preparation for the first extended duration orbiter missions called EDOs, where the shuttle was going to stay up to 10 to 16 days in space, STS-32 will conduct many medical and mid-deck scientific experiments. The caduceus on the left in the circle represents the medical experiments, whereas the crystalline structure on the right in the circle represents the material science experiments. We had Daniel Brandenstein, the commander. James Weatherby was the pilot. Bonnie Dunbar was a mission specialist. David Lowe was a mission specialist. And Marcia Ivins was a mission specialist. This was Marcia's first of 2 flights in January. She's one of the pilots that had been launched twice. She went up to the Mir space station on STS-81. So that's a little brief. Columbia was the orbiter for STS-32. There is the gorgeous launch of it, breaking through the cloud deck, taken by a chase plane, no doubt, the T-38. They usually had a couple astronauts in it. Look at that gorgeous picture. I love these kind of shots of our shuttle. And there is the Long Duration Exposure Facility after it had been in space for almost 4 years. And they packed around the side of this thing polymers, paint, different types of metal, material, even wood. Things like that were put up there to see what would last the longest when building the International Space Station and future spacecraft. So they really got their money's worth out of this because it stayed up longer than they wanted it to. Well, the next flight of January is STS-72, and here is the patch of this. I'm going to read this patch also and then save the 8 others for other Stay Curious programs. But the STS-72 patch depicts the orbiter Endeavour and some of the payloads on the flight. The Japanese Satellite Space Flyer Unit, SFU, is shown in the free-flying configuration with the solar array panels deployed. The inner gold border of the patch itself represents the SFU's distinct octagonal shape. That's interesting. Endeavour will rendezvous with and retrieve SFU at an altitude of approximately 250 miles. The Office of Aeronautics and Space Technology Flyer Satellite, the OAST, is shown just after release by the robotic arm manipulator system, they call it. The OAST was deployed at an altitude of 165 feet and was allowed to fly free for 2 days, gathering scientific data and then retrieved. The payload bay contains equipment for the secondary payloads, the shuttle laser altimeter, and the shuttle solar backscatter ultraviolet experiment. There are 2 extravehicular activities planned to test hardware for assembly on the International Space Station, as well as the spacesuits. There you see the astronaut in the upper right. The stars represents the crew's hometowns in the United States and Japan. So you see the stars on the American, North America, and then Japan there. Gee, I never knew that before, that they put their hometowns on there. So that would be Brian Duffy, the commander, Brett Jett, the pilot, Leroy Chow, the mission specialist, Dan Barry, the mission specialist, of course, Winston Scott, who did a spacewalk, and Koichi Wakata, the Japanese astronaut that went up there. And so a great crew. And here is our friend, Mr. Winston Scott, who's now the astronaut chief at the Kennedy Space Center Visitors Complex. He's the first one that calls up those astronauts to come out there and talk at the wonderful astronaut encounter program that our friend Nick Thomas is an astronaut wrangler out there. So is Mark Smith, another one of the presenters out there. So Winston did a very important spacewalk on this mission in 1996, before the Space Shuttle was even hardware was put in space. He did a spacewalk to test how cold he could get, and they purposely put him in the payload bay in the shadow at night to make him as cold as possible to test the heating units and everything. And he said he could feel a little cold in his fingertips, but other than that, he just felt fine. So Winston Scott's done several conversations with us on Stay Curious, and you can check them out on YouTube. Well, here's a very interesting mission. If there was ever an all-star mission of famous astronauts that are well known and give a lot in the community, here you've got them. STS 61C is its moniker. The 6 stands for fiscal year 1986. It was launched in January 86. The fiscal year goes from October 85 to October 86, technically. That's why 51L Challenger, though it was launched in 86, is a 5 because it was the fiscal year when it was funded and supposed to fly. The 1 means it was launched from Kennedy Space Center, and the C means ABC type of thing. So this convoluted 14 missions of alphabet soup, they went back to just the numbers after the Challenger. That was the 25th mission, and the return to flight was STS-26. So launched January 12th. Robert Hoot Gibson, Charlie Bolden were the pilot and commanders. By the way, you know, the commander flies the plane, the spaceship. The pilot on the right-hand side is actually the co-pilot, but when you're on a shuttle, nothing's co. All right, so they wouldn't call him pilot, co-pilot. They simply call him commander, pilot. So, but you better believe the commander's got his hands on the stick, so to speak, most of the mission. Franklin Chang Diaz, I think this was his first of 7 space flights. Stephen Hawley is there. Here's a picture of the upper deck. with the astronauts. That would be Hoot Gibson on the left and Charlie Bolden, or Hoot Gibson on the right, Charlie Bolden on the left. Uh, Steve Hawley is there in the middle. George Pinky Nelson flew on this with Bob Senker and Congressman Bill Nelson. So two Nelsons, George Pinky's his nickname, and Bill Nelson are who is a congressman from Florida then, is now a NASA administrator. And his pilot for this mission was Charlie Bolden, who was a former NASA administrator under the Obama administration. So that's where we get two NASA administrators, two Nelsons flew together on this mission, and Hoot Gibson had control of the whole thing. Now, notice here they're in just coveralls, just blue flight suits going to space. And that certainly had to feel a little bit different to a test pilot like Hoot Gibson and Charlie Bolden. But nonetheless, it was deemed that they didn't need to have any type of rescue suits or anything like that. And that all changed pretty quickly after 51 out. Again, the shuttles of the month of January. 3 times Columbia was launched. Challenger launched once. Discovery twice. OV-104 Atlantis was launched once. And Endeavour OV-105 was launched 3 times in the month of January. And one of our favorite guys that we've gotten to know at the Space Museum was the commander of the next flight with Atlantis, STS-81, in January 12, 1997, was launched at 4:27 in the morning to dock with the Russian space station Mir and bring back John Blaha, who had been in space for 118 days. All right, they dropped off Blaha they dropped off Linenger. Jerry Linenger was dropped off for Blaha that had been up there. Now, what's neat about this mission is Mike Baker was the pilot with his commander, John Blaha, on his first flight. And here Bakes is now picking up his former commander as commander of a space shuttle. And we talked to him about that on a conversation with Stay Curious. Mike Baker went on to be the liaison for NASA for 5 or 6 years at Star City and Moscow and Baikonur as we used the Russian spaceship to get to the International Space Station for about 8 or 9 years. And here was the contrast, okay? Going from here, all right, in 1987 to here, in 1997, the astronauts, and that's Bakes over here above my head, and Brett Jett is his pilot over there on the left, and that looks like Grunstra there in the middle. I could tell by his mustache there, and Peter Wissoff, I believe, is over there. You had Marcia Ivins, Peter Wissoff, and Jerry Linenger line this out. But there you've got another astronaut. I thought that was Marcia, but she'd be in a spacesuit in the lower mid deck there. But that's the astronaut closeout crew member there, helping them out there. I have to tease Bakes about wearing glasses there, or is that a monocle? And here they are all on the Mir space station. Quite an event. We docked with the Mir space station 9 times. Had 8 crew exchanges. There's Linenger up there in the blue, already acclimating himself to the Russian system there. And John Blaha is right there. Marcia Ivins has got the big hair. Blaha's there center. Mike Baker's on the far right, and that's Grunstra there in the middle. Well, another flight that was a good one was 54 in 1993. They deployed a tracking data and relay satellites up there. John Casper was the pilot, Don McMongle. Mario Runco, famous on Star Trek lovers on this flight, Greg Harbaugh and Susan Helms. And that is the Susan Helms going up there, later she's a general in the Air Force now. They deployed the TDRS, all right, which are the important satellites shown here, that all of the communications from NASA satellites, weather satellite, and stuff like that. International Space Station now. Used to be the shuttle, all went through there. Not so much military stuff. They got their own satellites. And then, of course, they did experiments in the payload bay. And then the sixth launch of the month of January would be Columbia on January 16th. All right, scheduled to land February 1st. And of course, we know what happened. This was a microgravity experiment that was very successful. Rick Husband was the commander on his second space shuttle flight. He was pilot before, so he had a lot on the ball to be a one-time pilot and then a commander. Willie McCool was the rookie pilot. Mike Anderson was making would have made his second trip to space. Mike was on. Let's see. Mike Anderson was on. I got my notes here on that. What was Endeavor on STS-89? He flew in January. Okay. And of course, Laurel Clark, David Brown, Paul Nachala, and Elon Ramon, the Israeli astronaut, on there. And this was a very successful microgravity experiment. Here's the crew looking at things. Israeli astronaut there's on the left. You've got Rick Husbands looking at something with Colt Nachala and Laurel Clark looking on. The back of the head there is Willie McCool. Dan Brown's in the back there, so is Michael Anderson. And I love these pictures of the crew all working together. This was a very, very successful mission. Most of the data was sent back to Earth because of the internet and so forth. So, and we will have a couple special programs throughout this month honoring our fallen heroes. Another great mission. This patch is really big too. Those of you that collect patches, it's one of the bigger patches. By the way, let me go back and talk about just briefly the Columbia patch is the only shuttle patch that is the outline of the shuttle. How ironic is that? And a beautiful patch at that. The MG microgravity and then the astronaut symbol in the middle. Just a gorgeous patch. This one's quite big and large, very, very, for those of you that collect it. This was a very important international microgravity lab making its first flight using a pressurized space lab module where they would all get inside. The kind of space lab module that was on the same module, I think, that was on Columbia and its demise. You had Ronald Grabe, who was the commander, Steve Oswald, pilot. Norm Thagard was on this, met Norm many times. Dave Hilmers, Bill Reedy, Roberta Bondar is Canada's first female astronaut and now a photographer, and Ulf Merbold of Germany, making another trip to space on there. So a very cool looking patch emphasizing the science being done on there with the 7 astronauts aboard Endeavor. Here they are inside this spacious little module there doing things. That's Bonder right there. I can recognize her. And everybody's busy doing their own thing. Don't have time to say cheese. We got to get this experiment done and on to the next one. Well, Endeavor was the next flight, the 8th shuttle docking on January 22nd, 1998. And Terry Wilcutt is the commander. And Mike Baker had Wilcutt as his pilot on 2 missions before. So we've met Terry out to Space Center many times. Very, very nice guy Terry Wilcutt is. And I'll bet he's a great commander. There's what the Mir space station looked like when one of the Russian Soyuz backed off to basically take these pictures of the configuration of it. Quite an ominous looking sight that would be. Joe Edwards is the pilot, Bonnie Dunbar, making a trip to space, and mission specialist Mike Anderson, like I said, his first trip to space. James Riley, you had Russian Shapirov above, and Andy Thomas was taken up to the space station for the last person to go up there, and David Wolf was brought back on STS-89 on this mission that we will highlight some of that as we go through the month. Now, here is the only top secret mission that the astronauts would have to kill you, of course, to talk about it. And the commander was Tom Mattingly up there. We just lost Mr. Mattingly back 2 months ago before the holidays. Lawrence Shriver's the commander there. The pilot, Mattingly was of course, the moon orbiter Tom Mattingly in Apollo 16. Lawrence Shriver's the pilot. Al Onizuka, shown here with Lawrence Shriver, was on his first and only flight, having lost his life in Challenger. James Buckley and Gary Payton are part of this Orbiter Challenger mission. They were going to have it on Challenger, but it was substituted for Discovery because of tile problems. And this was like they don't talk much about it. It was the first classified mission for the Department of Defense, January 24th, 1985. Then Mr. Onizuka went in training for his mission on 51L and, of course, lost his life. But these Department of Defense missions, this was the first one, and the top secret payloads they had in 1986 through 1989 and 90 definitely brought the communist curtain down for the USSR, who transitioned to Russia, as if there was much of a difference. But the wall came down and so forth like that because these DoD missions, make no bones about that. And then, of course, the last mission that was launched in January was January 28, 1986. And that was, of course, Challenger. Then our beautiful astronauts there in 1986 in a learning environment there. That's Barbara Morgan on the right. She didn't fly, but she was the backup to Krista McAuliffe, who's seated there kind of nonchalantly. And then Judy Resnick's got the black hair. There's Al Onizuka, Rob McNair, and Greg Jarvis there in the back. 1986, Selvin. Those lockers look like they're from the 1930s, and you still got a chalkboard there. And boy, nice TV they have in there, everybody. We're going to broadcast you a little tutorial here on this TV that Gregory Jarvis brought in from his trailer. That's the way it was back then, learning something about their flights. So we love celebrating the shuttle era for this reason. The humans' lives lost will never, ever be forgotten about. But that is not why we want to remember the shuttle era. We want to remember it for the fabulous science that it did. The bedrock of what's been going on for 20 years on the International Space Station is all because of these premier missions that taught us how to do it. And then, like spacewalker Winston Scott, brave to go out there and be the coldest anybody's ever been in space, which was 200 below zero, and his spacesuit got down to maybe in the 60s, he said, but he was still comfortable to learn how to do things and work as earthlings trying to get off this planet and do things. Can't say enough about it, and we hope that you enjoy more Stay Curious programs with us about the shuttle era. Here's a picture that Marty took. Can't leave you out, my friend, though he's under the weather today. This is out there at the shuttle landing strip, the final wheel stop on July 21st, 2011, where Atlantis touched down and stopped for the last time right on this very spot after 33 missions and 307 days in space. So, and another gorgeous shot of our shuttle going off Earth there from Kennedy Space Center down there. The coastal line there's gorgeous on there. Just one of those rare shots that it'll be a while before we see any humans occupied in a photograph like this, because the solid rocket boosters are what's making the trail there, and the SpaceX Falcon 9 doesn't leave a trail like that. So, well, Selvin, thank you for helping with the show today. Always you're a pro there at the Streamlabs console there. We're sorry for the hiccup we had, but nothing better to do than just bail out of it and start all over again. So For those of you that have been following us for almost 4 years, we can't thank you enough for all your support. We're going to be bragging about you all on Friday. I'm going to make some special slides up to acknowledge some of you all have contributed to us financially. We are so grateful for that because we need it as a humble nonprofit competing against thousands of other nonprofits in this uh, paradise of Florida down here. So we'll be talking about that as we go on and about our events coming up around the corner, including our Astronaut Memorial, January 28th on Sunday at 1 o'clock at Sandpoint Park at the foot of the big bridge here in downtown Titusville. We'll be honoring the 17 astronauts who have lost their lives and those that passed away in 2023. And that will be on our YouTube channel. If you can't attend it in person, astronaut Andy Allen is scheduled to be our main speaker. So, Selvin, we have got a wonderful guest. Rick Horner will be here tomorrow. Rick is a shuttle engineer, and now he's an engineer with Lockheed Martin in their science division. And Rick will have a lot of great stories to tell us on Thursday as you stay curious with us. And then Friday, we're going to look back at my top 10 of 2023 and honor some of you all who supported us mightily in the last year. So until then, I'm Mark Marquette saying, I can't wait to see you tomorrow to bridge the space between us. Good.